So I'll go ahead and start off by defining what PCK is. Essentially, it is the idea of the teacher's ability to transform their content knowledge into something that their students can understand. So it's essentially the idea that you have the knowledge of what chemistry is, but you also have this teaching knowledge of knowing what teaching is. So when you combine the two, you have your pedagogical content knowledge, which is teaching chemistry, is this. So the reason why we're looking at Organic Lab 2, if we break down the GSI appointments by number, a lot of our GSIs are going to be in the Organic Lab definition, and a high percentage of first years are also in Organic Lab. So one of the problems with GSIs is that a lot of times training is kind of non-specific, or your GSI will only teach once, so any kind of pedagogical knowledge that they pick up when they teach their lab for the first time, they will not continue on and bring back to the lab. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to try and examine the PCK so that we can figure out ways to try and teach the PCK that is developed over time in the Organic 2 lab and just give that to the first years from the start. So this is a high chance for professional development in terms of grabbing these first year GSIs and giving them a chance to learn some pedagogical techniques. So what we did to measure the PCK is we developed a test item. And first what we did is we produced these test items, which were then judged, and then we constructed and piloted our instrument, which was in the form of a survey. After the survey, we developed a rubric to grade the responses that were related to teaching questions. And afterwards, we validated our method using Rausch analysis, which I'll explain later. So in the development of this survey, we developed questions that probe both content knowledge and pedagogical content knowledge, with the idea that you need to have content knowledge in order to have pedagogical content knowledge. So these questions here are the content knowledge questions, which were designed to probe GSI content knowledge of solubility concepts. And over here, we have our questions that were capable of probing then the pedagogical knowledge behind teaching these concepts. And I know you guys don't have time to read this, but we had a range of difficulty for these questions. So that way we were expecting some to be easy, some to be hard. Here is the rubric that we used for grading our pedagogical content knowledge questions. And they range from a score of 1, which is a limited response that has essentially just a textbook answer that doesn't really help the student out that much, to these exemplary responses, where they show a transformation of what the technical knowledge is to something that anybody can understand. So we took these scores and we applied the Rausch model, which what that does is it calibrates the person ability versus the item difficulty to be on a logit scale, which is the same scale. So this allows us to calibrate the test item difficulty against how well people were doing on the test. So what that means is easier items should have a lower score, and people that score higher are going to be more likely to answer an item that is below their score. This will be easier to see if I show you an item person map. So here is our content knowledge person map. So on the left here we have the item difficulties, and on the right we have the person performance. And here we have the average score should be about 0 if you do the Rausch analysis right. And so we had some that were a little above average in terms of difficulty, but for the most part, the content knowledge questions were pretty easy for the GSIs. Most of the GSIs have a high chance of getting all of these questions right, or most of them pretty much right, which is good. We want our GSIs to be coming in with content knowledge of the chemistry that they're going to be teaching. And this confirms the fact that yes, the GSIs do know the basic science. However, if we look at their pedagogical content knowledge, the score is lower, and most GSIs were scoring below average, and a lot of the test items were actually outscoring the GSIs. So this means that in general, the GSIs were not performing as well, and in fact, we actually did have a negative average for our logit scale, which means that overall, a lot of these were first-year GSIs, so the pedagogical content knowledge is definitely lacking. Here we have a correlation between the content knowledge and the pedagogical content knowledge. And this just kind of maps out the logic scales of one against the other. And what we see here is there is a small but positive correlation. So that means that as your content knowledge increases, you're more likely to have pedagogical content knowledge. The extent of that is not proved or disproven by this correlation. We just know that it's there. So there's also a division between our new GSIs and our experienced GSIs, where the experienced GSIs are showing that they're more likely to have a higher amount of PCK with respect to having more content knowledge. We also wanted to see, is pedagogical content knowledge developed over time? And it appears that, again, we have a small but positive correlation. So as you teach the course more and more, you do seem to develop more pedagogical content knowledge. We can't say to what extent, but it appears that there is a correlation. It's small but positive. So kind of to sum up, what we have done is we've developed an instrument to try and examine GSI pedagogical content knowledge, and we have found that there is a correlation between the content knowledge of the GSI and the number of terms teaching of the GSI. What we would like to do is to try and implement some more course-specific training to try and get more people from these negative values to these positive values for pedagogical content knowledge. And that is something that we did try to do this semester. We piloted a training course that was one day before the semester started and during staff meetings. And we have not been able to unpack any data from that yet, as this semester is still in progress and about to conclude. So with that, I'll take any questions. Yes.
So when you mentioned like your rubric of, I guess, like judging the responses by the GSIs as far as mostly just focusing on like the evaluation of their response, like being, I guess, like more of a better teaching response or something. Like how I guess, is that like an opinion, like, or you know, how do you make that into like an objective evaluation?
So having it be purely objective is not really going to happen, but what we have done is that it's not just me that's doing the scoring, it's me and 2 others that have done the scoring. So we did integrate a reliability to make sure that the rubric is coming to a same or similar score across all 3 of the graders.
I understand that most of what you're developing here is the tool, I think, is the focus of your work, and can we actually measure PCK around a specific topic or whatever you're working on. But do you think all teaching experiences would be equivalent in helping increase PCK, or do you think there could be certain kinds of teaching experiences, whether like assignments or things that actually happen during that teaching, that would help increase PCK? What's your...
So if I understand your question correctly, you're asking, does experience in, say, 210 or 211 correlate to an increase in PCK in 216?
I don't actually mean course specific. I actually mean kinds of interactions with students or ways in which you're forced or required to explain content. Like, do you think any of those would make a difference in how or if PCK is developed?
That might be a you need to talk to me in 6 months question.
Okay.
Because we did do, during the semester, we focused on trying to teach the GSIs how to do questioning techniques that are more constructivist.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to force a different kind of teaching within the lab, we haven't been able to unpack any data from that yet.
Okay, but you are trying to look at sort of the quality of, or the kind of interactions that they have and what that means for development.
Yes, we have some interview data as well that we have
cool.
to examine. Yeah.
So like you're saying, you know, more experienced GSIs, like you're saying you're focusing more about that, but there are a lot of people who go from like teaching 130 in the fall to like 216 in the winter sometimes. Like, do you think that like this is showing that we should try to keep people like teaching the same thing every semester, or like we should have extra training from like semester to semester, or like how do you think that affects your answers as well? If someone has like 4 semesters of teaching but 4 different courses.
Yeah, so we haven't examined that demographic. If we do have it, it's maybe 1 or 2 people within our data set, so I can't